This delicious dried apricot, red pepper, and thyme chutney recipe gives you plenty of lunch, dinner, and snacking options. This condiment easily works as a stuffing, topping, dip, or spread, and accompanies pork, vegetables, and lamb whenever you need to spruce up your everyday favorites. And whether it's a weekend or a weeknight, this chutney will keep even your picky eaters satisfied. And that's because this recipe combines and balances flavors that really creates a satisfying taste. It doesn't lean too sweet or too spicy or too herbal. And for this reason, I call it my Goldilocks jam because it's just right. Better yet, this recipe only requires a 10-minute water bath and you don't need any special canning equipment. In just a minute, I'll take you step by step through the recipe. But first, let me show you how you can use this chutney in your everyday meals so that you can start using this tonight. You'll enjoy substituting your usual relish on a turkey cheddar frank or hot dog with this chutney that'll impart a savory flavor that still hits all the notes of onion, subtle sweetness, accompanied by an unmistakable creamy texture. This recipe melts a combination of 6 fruits and veggies and 4 seasonings, so variety is cooked right in. Go ahead, take your first bite, and other than a pat of mayo, this may be the only condiment you need. Roasted garlic hummus is bueno on its own, but sometimes even your favorites need a switch up. Try adding a dollop of this chutney to your favorite hummus. It'll not only give it a visually satisfying upgrade to your weekday lunch, last-minute charcuterie board, or get-together, but oh my, the flavor addition works with virtually anything and truly gives you unlimited options. If chicken and rice is a staple in your home, but you find yourself needing to change things up, you'll enjoy how well this goes with chicken. As a spread, it'll give a full-bodied texture from the chewy apricots, light floral notes from the thyme, with the classic combination of pepper and onion. You won't find this on the shelf at your local grocer, so when your spouse or guest comment about how much they enjoy this spread, you can proudly reply, "Thanks, I made it myself." If you're thinking this chutney would work excellent in meatloaf or meatballs, my dear, you are right. After a busy day at work, I truly enjoy the convenience of having only to crack an egg, add breadcrumbs and a scoop or 2 of this chutney, and know that I've just infused tons of flavor without the chopping, slicing, dicing, or mess. Each bite of any meat with this chutney rolled in is moist and delicious. I paired this with my own homemade scalloped potatoes made with dehydrated cheese I purchased from the Amish market with a side of fermented asparagus. A serving of salmon is very low in saturated fat and a good source of protein, but sometimes you need to know what to do with it. Voila, dried apricot, red bell pepper, and thyme chutney to the rescue, because that's exactly what this spread will do. Bake your salmon, spread the chutney on top, and your lunch or dinner is both done and delicious. Do you ever find yourself in a, how am I going to prepare this chicken rut? Yep, me too. But the problem is solved when you have jars of this chutney around. Try taking several spoonfuls of this rolled into chicken breast or thighs with spinach, cheese, and artichokes. Oh, wowzers. This is our first time meeting. Hi, I'm Cassandra from the blog becomingafarmgirl.com, where I share kitchen gardening and canning recipes. Don't worry about writing the recipe down. I'll include a link to the printable recipe in the description box below. Now let's get to the recipe. But stay posted because in a couple of minutes I'm going to give you my recipe tips. And this includes how I source the recipe, canning safety, and other recommendations. Start by thoroughly cleaning and rinsing your red bell peppers and apples. Next, roughly dice your red bell peppers by cutting off the stem and the bottom end of the peppers. Then remove the inner core and seeds, set aside. Now measure out the dried apricots and give them a rough chop. You can cut them into halves or quarters. It's now time to chop our onions. You can use whatever you have on hand. But if you prefer a milder onion flavor with a natural touch of sweetness, sweet onions, which are the ones I'm using in this recipe, are an excellent choice. And don't forget to save your onion skins and ends. I like to stash mine in the freezer to have on hand for flavoring my stocks and broths. Lastly, we'll cut up our apples. One of the great things I enjoy about chutneys is that you get to combine fruit and vegetables. This recipe has moderate amounts of vitamin A, C, potassium, and fiber, and while we will add some sugar in a moment, vinegar is the true preservative. Now it's time to add all our chopped ingredients to a saucepan over medium-high heat. And fold in brown sugar, golden raisins, candied ginger, apple cider vinegar, and water. Allow everything to come to a full boil, then reduce to a simmer for 20 to 40 minutes, stirring occasionally. About 10 minutes into your simmer, incorporate the thyme. You can use fresh or dried. Now we're going to add our spices, which include ground cinnamon, a little bit of salt, cayenne, and mustard powder. You're going to give everything a good stir to fully incorporate, and then allow things to come to a boil, then immediately reduce the heat, cover with a lid, and simmer until the ingredients are soft. Alright, so while our chutney is simmering on the stove, I wanted to insert some recipe tips. I'd like to start by sharing that I take safe canning practices very seriously. As such, I only use published recipes from sources like the US Department of Agriculture, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and companies like Ball and Bernardin. The recipe that I'm going to share with you today is one that I adapted from the book Complete Book of Small Batch Preserving, Over 300 Recipes to Use Year-Round by Ellie Topp and Margaret Howard. I cannot recommend this book enough. If you're the kind of canner that preserves in small batches of 4 to 10 jars per session, and if you want a cookbook that will take you through the seasons, and if you're looking for variety, this cookbook covers jams, jellies, marmalades, pickles, relishes, salsas, oils and specialty vinegars, chutneys, sauces, spreads. I mean, you get it all. Now, while this cookbook does have over 300 recipes, it definitely is limited in canning single items. Instead, it favors one-pot recipes. The only drawback is that this cookbook doesn't have pictures, but the titles are both direct and enticing enough to really give you a description of what you're going to make. Plus, each recipe also comes with a description of at least 3 sentences, sometimes up to a paragraph, that really kind of gives you a flavor profile of what you're making. I would also recommend checking out the reviews on Amazon. This book has been a bestseller in food preservation for decades, and I can see why. It's truly a classic. It's definitely in my top 5 canning books. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Again, I highly recommend this book. So I did make some slight adjustments, and here's the first. I did leave the skin on my apples. And leaving the skin on your apples for canning is both allowable and safe. It's just typically removed for aesthetic. But because this recipe simmers for a while, the skins completely break down. I can assure you, you will not discern the texture or the taste of the peel at all, and plus it just adds a bit of fiber. I also added some thyme just because I have so much of it growing in my planter boxes out back. I think the addition of thyme just makes it a little bit more bright, and it's an herb that just works. It just works so well with this recipe. Definitely try it if you have some fresh or dehydrated on hand. Plus, as a small space grower who was not growing and preserving the majority of her food, it's a way for me to just kind of sneak in the love when I can add to the label on the top of my jars whatever the recipe is, and then insert year from my summer garden. So it makes it extra special for me with my home canned foods. Next, chutneys are easy, but they're not quick. They really like a low and slow simmer, so give yourself about 30-35 minutes for this to gently simmer on the stove. All right, another thing, you can also use frozen onion, red peppers, and fresh apricots for this recipe. Another recommendation from the book was that you could totally substitute apricots for peaches. Now, I haven't tried this because peaches aren't yet in season, but when they are, I can totally see myself going back, revisiting this recipe, and using peaches. And another thing, if you are using fresh herbs like I am, consider using some type of herb sachet. You can make one out of cheesecloth. I typically like to save my cheesecloth for other recipes, and instead an option that I have found to be much cheaper are these disposable tea sacks. And it just makes it easier for you to infuse the herbal flavor into the dish without accidentally forgetting to remove any of the woody stems and ends. All right, friends, that's all I've got. Let's jump back into the recipe.
You've got to prepare for this gorgeous reveal. Once you have everything cooked down, you'll not only have delicious aromatics in your home to enjoy now, but by canning, you can preserve some for later. Because we've used high acid ingredients, we'll use a water bath method to preserve this goodness as a shelf-stable condiment for the next year, and this is easy. All you do is ladle the chutney goodness into sterilized half-pint jars, leaving a 1/4 inch of headspace. You can sterilize your jars using the sterilization setting on your dishwasher. Then use a wooden or plastic utensil to debubble the recipe, which removes trapped air bubbles, and then clean the rim of your jars with vinegar. You'll then place new lids on top and secure with the ring until it's fingertip tight, which is secure but not aggressively so. Then you'll place the jars into a tall pot lined with a metal rack or plate so that the jars don't touch the surface of the pot. Then you'll fill the pot with water to cover at least an inch over the jars, and then bring everything to a full boil for 10 minutes. Then you'll cut the heat and remove the jars. You'll allow the jars to cool undisturbed for 24 hours. After this, you can remove the rings and tap on the lids, which should be concave. If any of the lids bounce back, that's okay, just pop them in the fridge to enjoy over the next few weeks. To get more canning recipes and kitchen gardening tips for your homestead, join me here weekly. I'll see you in my kitchen or garden soon.